Around the conference table, tension sat heavier than the leather chairs. Michael Harris, the proud CEO of a car company that was starting to fall apart, turned his attention on the least expected target, the janitor. Tom Miller had spent decades pushing a mop, quietly picking up on the little things the engineers overlooked. When he finally spoke up and offered a fix that might save the company, Michael laughed straight at him. "I don't take advice from apes," he sneered, before firing Tom in front of everyone. What Michael didn't realize was that Tom's idea would spark something new, an empire that would outlast his own and eventually bring the two of them face to face again, only with the roles reversed. Long before the sun touched the skyline, Tom Miller was already at the factory. He rolled his mop bucket past the sleeping robots and the rows of cold steel. The air carried the sharp bite of aluminum shavings and machine oil. The overhead lights buzzed, and his breath came out in small ghosts in the chill. Tom moved with calm precision, gloved hands steady, back straight, every step measured. Years of work had given him a rhythm: swish, lift, ring, listen. And listening was something he did better than most. Engines sat on stands like silver hearts. One of them ticked as it cooled. Tom paused, letting his fingertips hover close enough to feel the faint vibration. Something wasn't right, a thin, papery rattle that shouldn't have been there. He noted it in his mind, then kept the aisle spotless, like always. By the coffee machines, two engineers whispered. "Old guy's scribbling in that notebook again," one muttered. The other chuckled. "Probably keeping track of stains." Tom heard them but didn't react. He shifted his bucket, wiped up a small streak of oil no one else would have noticed, and smoothed out a scuff on the yellow safety stripe. What looked like habit was really discipline. As the first shift poured in, the factory came alive. The air heated, and the noise stacked up, wrenches snapping, pallets rolling, forklifts chirping in reverse. Tom straightened a crooked clipboard, squared it to the edge, and kept moving. His eyes drifted toward the wall of framed photos, launch days, ribbon cuttings, staged smiles. At the center of it all was Michael Harris, sharp suit, jaw set like stone. Every now and then, Michael walked the mezzanine with assistants flanking him, phone in his hand like a scepter. Today, he strode above the factory floor without glancing down, not seeing Tom, not seeing anyone without a title. Two line workers watched Tom kneel to tighten a loose floor plate with a pocket wrench. "Guy never misses a shift," one said. "He's older than the paint." Still, the other replied with a shrug, place would fall apart without him. Tom stood, brushed the dust from his knee, and breathed. He liked the way the factory woke up, first the lights, then the chatter, then the full roar. Order, even if the people weren't. At lunch, he sat near the loading dock, steam curling from a beat-up thermos. The winter air slipped inside every time the bay door opened, and he pulled his jacket tight. Across the yard, a test car coughed to life, stumbled, then recovered. Closing his eyes, Tom traced the sound in his mind: fuel, air, timing, like running a finger down a river. He jotted one line in his notebook: heat fade at 2000 rpm. Check polymer choice on bearing seats. Later that afternoon, a supervisor rushed past and clipped his shoulder without a glance. Papers flew, but Tom snatched them out of the air with surgeon's precision, then kept walking. No fuss, no flair. He pushed his bucket toward the boardroom corridor, the one part of the building that still smelled like cologne and glass cleaner. Voices spilled from a cracked door, clipped arguments, reports about rising returns, customers furious. A fist hit the table, dull and final. Tom didn't linger. He swapped out a trash liner, polished a fingerprint off the brass handle, and caught his own reflection. Tired eyes. Quiet resolve. He squeezed the handle once, almost like a prayer, then rolled his bucket onward. The floors gleamed behind him, engines waited ahead, and Tom Miller lived in the space between those two worlds. He noticed what no one else would: the tiny, expensive flaw hiding in plain sight. Once upon a time, the company's cars rolled off the lot like trophies. They were loud, shiny, untouchable. But the shine was wearing thin. It started small, quiet complaints. A customer muttering over coffee at the service center, paid 50 grand, and the thing died after 6 months. Another man leaning in, whispering, "Mine too." Transmission gave out on the freeway. Within weeks, whispers grew into headlines. Local radio hosts cracked jokes at Michael Harris's expense. Better buy 2, 1 to drive, 1 for spare parts. Lawsuits piled up in the legal department like bricks. On the factory floor, the mood thickened. Workers moved faster, sneaking uneasy glances when test cars sputtered during quality checks. You could taste the tension in the air. By the time Michael stormed into the plant, jaw tight, suit sharp, everyone went stiff. He strode past Tom without so much as a glance. Tom paused, mop handle tucked under his arm, eyes narrowed as another engine stumbled, choked, then caught itself. He knew that sound too well. In the cafeteria, gossip carried louder than the clatter of trays. People are dumping these cars left and right. Yeah, I heard corporates bleeding millions. Guess Mr. Untouchable finally hit a wall. Nervous laughter followed. Some glanced at Tom, mopping in the corner. One worker leaned toward another. Crazy thing is, that old guy probably knows more than half the managers here. His buddy smirked. Yeah, but who's listening to a janitor? Boardroom meetings stretched late into the night. Through the glass, Tom sometimes caught sight of Michael slamming folders shut, veins bulging at his temple. Executives shuffled papers like nervous students. Slideshows flashed red graphs that sank lower every week. The brand that once seemed untouchable was unraveling. Customers weren't just upset anymore, they were walking away. Investors weren't just anxious, they were furious. And in that anger, people looked for easy scapegoats. Engineers blamed the suppliers. Managers blamed the crews. Crews muttered about the managers. And Tom? Tom just kept cleaning. His strokes were slow, steady, deliberate. His bucket wheels squeaked along the tile. Sometimes he paused by the test bay, notebook open, jotting as if he were resting his back. His notes were sharp and simple: material fatigue. Engine housing cracks under stress. Needs reinforcement. Not cost cutting. He underlined the last part twice. Upstairs, Michael's voice cut through the halls, sharp as broken glass. Fix it, or I'll find someone who can. Chairs scraped. No one dared push back. That night, Tom leaned his mop into the shadows of the corridor, listening to the echoes of anger. He looked down at his hands, scarred, strong, steady. He thought, they don't see it. They don't want to. But the answer's right in front of them. He sighed, returned to his work, and let the storm rage above him. Storms always passed. What lasted was what people had built right. The boardroom stank of stale coffee and panic. Papers cluttered the table. Charts flashed angry red across the projector screen. The hum of the air conditioner couldn't drown out the snapping voices. Executives circled the same arguments: suppliers, mechanics, the economy, any excuse but no real answers. At the head sat Michael Harris, jaw grinding, tie loosened but still strangling tight. His knuckles tapped a nervous beat against polished wood. Every so often, he cut through the noise with a bark: enough. I need solutions, not excuses. But no solutions came. Outside, Tom's bucket wheels squeaked along the marble as he slowed by a cracked door. He caught fragments: durability problems, customers leaving, billions at risk. Inside, one weary engineer pinched the bridge of his nose and muttered, "Hell, maybe we should ask the janitor. He spends more time around the engines than we do." A ripple of nervous laughter followed. It wasn't cruel, just resigned. Michael's eyes narrowed. "Bring him in." The room went silent as Tom Miller stepped through the door, mop still in hand. He glanced around, shoulders slightly hunched under the fluorescent glare. A few executives smirked, arms folded, waiting for a joke. At the head of the table, Michael Harris leaned back, his smirk sharp as a knife. "Well, Tom," he said, "since my highly paid team can't fix what's broken, why don't you tell us what's wrong with our cars?" Tom hesitated, rubbing his palm against the worn wood of the mop handle. His voice came steady, low, deliberate. "Engines are running too hot. The polymer bearings can't handle the stress. That's why they're cracking early. You cut costs on the wrong part. Reinforce that, and the cars will last." The words fell heavy, rippling through the silence. A few executives blinked, recognizing the truth. Michael's smirk twisted into a bitter laugh. "I don't take advice from apes. You belong in the forest." His chair screeched back as he jabbed a finger toward the door. "You're fired. Right now. Get out." Gasps cut through the room. A couple of executives shifted uncomfortably, but none spoke. Tom stood still, eyes clear, face calm. No outburst, no defense, just a quiet nod. He leaned the mop against the wall, straightened his jacket cuffs, and walked out with a dignity that made the boardroom feel smaller. The whispers started the moment the door closed. "Guy was onto something. Did you hear how clear that was? He's not wrong." Michael slammed a folder onto the table. "Focus on your jobs. I don't pay you to listen to janitors." At the far end of the table, one investor leaned back, pen tapping against the wood. He hadn't laughed. He hadn't smirked. His eyes followed Tom's retreat through the glass wall. A quiet man everyone had overlooked. Outside, Tom didn't look back. His footsteps echoed down the corridor, mop left behind. But in his hand, he clutched his notebook. Because sometimes the moment you're dismissed is the moment something greater begins. That night, the factory floor felt emptier than usual. Tom moved slowly toward the exit, lunchbox tucked under his arm, old boots scuffing the polished tile he'd once kept shining. His face carried no bitterness, just a weathered calm. But in his chest, the weight was heavy. Decades of loyalty, erased with a single insult. "Tom." The voice came from the shadows by the glass doors. Daniel Brooks, one of the quieter investors, usually invisible in meetings, stepped forward. Coat draped over his arm, his eyes sharp with curiosity. "You weren't wrong in there," he said flatly. "Those engines are failing exactly the way you described." Tom blinked, cautious. "Doesn't matter now. They've already shown me the door." Daniel shook his head, lowering his voice. "Maybe it matters more than you think. I believe in what you said. I'll back you, your design, your knowledge. Start your own line. Build it better." Tom's grip tightened on the lunchbox. His heart thudded. He'd scribbled solutions for years, filled notebooks with ideas. But he'd never imagined someone with real resources would take him seriously. Searching Daniel's eyes for mockery, he found only conviction. Months passed. A small workshop grew into a modest factory. Tom poured himself into every bolt and bearing. His hands were stained black with grease, shirts damp with sweat, pencil always tucked behind his ear as he sketched long into the night. Workers respected him. He didn't stand above them, but beside them. The shop's gossip sounded different here. "Boss knows his engines. He tests right alongside us. Never seen anyone work like him." Orders trickled in, then flooded. The cars, reinforced, reliable, built to last, earned trust fast. Families swore by them. Truckers spread the word. Demand roared to life. Meanwhile, Michael Harris's empire collapsed in plain sight. Headlines screamed of bankruptcies, recalls, fortunes evaporating. His board scattered like rats from a sinking ship. The same arrogance that once mocked Tom Miller now left Michael stranded and cornered. And Tom, he rose. Not loud, not boastful. Just steady. Brick by brick, engine by engine. Until the day came when the man once fired as nothing more than a janitor was asked to buy out the empire that had thrown him away. The bankruptcy chamber smelled of sweat and old paper. Michael Harris sat slumped at the long table, his once pristine suit wrinkled, his tie drooping like a noose. Around him, lawyers shuffled stacks of papers, whispering numbers that bled red ink. His empire was gone. The doors creaked open. Every head turned. Tom Miller stepped inside. Not with a mop, not in coveralls. He wore a dark, tailored suit, polished shoes, shoulders squared. In his hand he carried the same notebook from years ago, no longer just scribbles, but a symbol. The room froze. Michael's face drained of color. "You," he whispered, disbelief cracking his voice. Tom didn't gloat. He simply sat, pen poised, and signed the papers that transferred ownership. Calm. Precise. Deliberate. The way he had always been. When it was finished, he stood and spoke, his voice filling the silence. Arrogance costs you everything. Respect costs nothing. The best ideas don't wear a title. They come from the people you overlook, the ones you look down on. Remember that, if you ever build again. No one moved. Michael stared at the table, broken. And Tom walked out, carrying not just the company but the story itself, because the janitor they ignored had become the man who redefined it all.